everyone, Katrina here. Today we're going to be talking all about curve sketching and optimization techniques. Please subscribe for more videos and be sure to watch to the end to see our full example unfold. So starting off today, I'm going to take you through a cool acronym that we can use to help us memorize all the different elements we need to know for curve sketching. So curve sketching is when we have some sort of function, it could be a polynomial, a rational function, really any type of function that we want to sketch. And it's not just a rough sketch, we want to incorporate key elements such as the global or local maxima, global or local minima, points of inflection, what is a concavity, are there asymptotes? We want to be sure that we can include all these key characteristics of our function. And this also helps us with optimization, because when we optimize a function, we're trying to determine what is its either maximum point or what is its either minimum point. So let's begin. So the cool acronym I'm going to teach you today is called DISCA. So I know different school boards use some different acronyms that might have the A first or D last, but I'm going to teach you the DISCA version today. It doesn't really matter the order in which you follow this acronym, just so long as that you include all these key elements so that you can have a complete sketch of your curve and understand how to optimize it. Okay, so diving in. The first thing we're going to look at is domain. That stands for the D in our DISCA. So the domain is the list of all x values for which the function is defined. So when we are trying to look for the domain, we want to make sure that we're using proper notation. So when we represent the domain of our function, we want to use something called set notation. So this is a very standardized type of notation. So this looks something like this. So we use these curly brackets. So we might say that x is an element of the real numbers, so it's defined everywhere, but then it might have a restriction. So if there's a restriction, we put this vertical line, which means such that. So it has that's the little lingo over there. So we have the such that, and let's say that our function only exists when x is greater than 2. So we would say such that x is greater than 2. So that means that this function can take on any real value of x such that x has to be greater than 2. Okay, so that is our domain. Let's move on to the I in our DISCA. So the I in our DISCA stands for intercepts. So we want to make sure that we're looking for both the y-intercept and the x-intercept of our function. These are key anchoring points that we need to include every time when we're sketching our curve. So note that sometimes these intercepts don't exist, but always make sure to look for them. And if they don't happen to exist, make sure that you make a note of that. So how do we find these intercepts? Okay, so if we're looking for the y-intercept, we need to evaluate f at 0. So that means we want to set x equals to 0, and then we want to solve for y. Okay, so usually that's a little bit easier because our functions are generally displayed such that you have y equals to a function of various different terms of x. So in this case, you just set all your x's to 0 and then you look for whatever remains. Where the x-intercept might be a little bit more challenging, but it's definitely something that you can do. For your x-intercept, you want to solve for when f of x equals to 0. So that pretty much means you set y equals to 0, and then you solve for x. So it's like the reverse, but in this case, we have to be aware that we might have to use some technique such as factor theorem in order to solve for this. Because you can have cases where you might have 5th degree, 6th degree, 7th degree of x. For example, let's just write a little example here. Maybe we have f of x equals to x to the 5 minus 7x to the 3 plus 2x squared minus 29. And we have to solve for x. Well, in this case, we're going to have to use probably factor theorem and remainder theorem to look for factors of x and use other techniques such as synthetic division in order to go through this. So if that's something you need a little bit extra help with, make sure that you check out my factoring playlist, because I include videos how to factor all sorts of polynomials and all types of functions, quadratics, as well as high order polynomials. So be sure to check out those videos if you need some help with factoring high order polynomials here. Okay, so that is our x and y intercepts. Let's move on to the s. So the s in our DISCA here is our symmetry. So there's two types of symmetry that we can have. The first type of symmetry is if you have an even function. And if you have an even function, that means, I guess mathematically or algebraically, that f of negative x equals to f of x. So if you have an even function, well, what type of symmetry is that? Well, that is actually line symmetry, and it's about the y-axis. So let's write that down. So we've got line symmetry about the y-axis. So if you think about a quadratic, let's look at an example there. We have our typical function x squared. We can see in this case that we have beautiful line symmetry about the y-axis here, so that if you were to reflect this function over the y-axis, you'd get the same thing. And if you think about transformations, this is reflected in that too. Whenever you have a negative right here in front of the x within the brackets, that represents your quote-unquote horizontal reflection, or your reflection over the y-axis. So this is reflection over y. And that makes sense here with regards to our symmetry. So we have that our even function has this reflection over the y-axis, and that means that you have line symmetry about the y-axis. Okay, so the second type of symmetry that you can have is when you have an odd function. So when you have an odd function, you can see that you have your negative f of negative x equals to your original function. So when this occurs mathematically, that means that you have point symmetry about the origin. So let's write that down. So this can also be interpreted as a reflection over your y-axis and then another reflection over your x-axis. Let's look at an example of that. So let's look at our function y equals to x cubed. So we have our little snake looking function over here. So we can see that it has point symmetry about the origin. So what that means is that you can do a rotation of 180 degrees about the origin, and after you do that rotation, you'll end up with your original function once more. So you can think of it either as that rotation, or you could think about it as a reflection over y and then a reflection over x. That is mathematically equivalent. And looking back to our transformations, here you can see that a negative in front of f is a reflection over x, and like we said, a negative within the bracket in front of x is a reflection over y. So the one thing I want to make sure that you're aware of is that even functions are different from even degree polynomials, just like how odd functions are different from odd degree polynomials. Just because your polynomial might be an even degree does not necessarily mean that it's actually an even function, because in order for it to be an even function, it has to satisfy this mathematical criteria over here. So always be sure to do this algebraic check to see if your function is even or odd, and once you know it's even or odd, it will tell you directly whether it's line symmetry or point symmetry. And there are cases where your function might have no symmetry, and that's all right too. So just make sure that you make a note of that. Okay, moving on to C. So C is our critical points and concavity. So this is our double meaning. So this is really exciting. And this really gets into the core of calculus and optimization, because our critical points are in concavity. They're going to tell us about our maxima and minima, which are also known as extrema. So let's see what's going to happen here. So the first thing that we want to do when we find our critical points, so say we have some function f of x. We want to take the first derivative of this so that we have f prime of x. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set it equal to 0 and we're going to solve for x. And those there are going to give us your critical points. So once you have your critical points, we're going to call our critical points A today. We can determine whether these critical points are maxima or minima. So in our first case over here, we have that f prime of A equals to 0. So right away that tells us that it's a critical point by our definition above. So if A is a critical point of f, and we see that the second derivative of A is greater than 0, that means that we have a local minimum at A, okay? And the second situation is if we have a critical point of f and the second derivative is negative, so that it's less than 0, that means that we have a local maximum at A, okay? So we have a critical point. If the second derivative is positive, greater than 0, we have a local minimum. And if the second derivative is negative, less than 0, then we have a local maximum. So that helps us classify our critical points. Well, there's another type of special point that we have to be aware of, and we're going to learn about that in case number 3. So if we have some point where our first derivative is not equal to 0, but our second derivative is equal to 0 at that point, that means that we have a point of inflection at A. So instead of calling this A, why don't we call this B? Because really it's not our main critical point. It's a point of inflection. It's a different type. So basically, in order to find this point, we just have to take the second derivative and set it to 0 and then solve for x. And that will give us our point of inflection. So what is a point of inflection? So that's a point where concavity changes. So where concavity changes. I'm misspelling that word. So concavity. There we go. So your function can either be concave up or it can be concave down. So that's where we're going to use the second derivative test right over here to help us. So the second derivative test helps us determine the concavity. We actually used it above here as well to determine if we had a local maximum or a local minimum. So the second derivative test tells us that if the second derivative is greater than 0 at our critical point, that means that we have a function that is concave up on that interval. So concave up. So at that critical point, if the function is greater than 0, our function is concave up. And at that critical point, if the second derivative is less than 0 at that critical point, that means that our function is concave down on that interval. So you might ask, well, how do I find that interval? So that's where the point of inflection right over here is going to be very helpful for us, because the point of inflection tells us where our concavity changes. So if we only have one point of inflection, that means that the concavity is only going to change once. That means everything on one side of that point is either concave up or down, and everything on the other side is the reverse. So on either side of your point of inflection, you should have different second derivatives. So let's just write that out over here. So say we have some number line, we have our point of inflection, then on one side, let's say our second derivative is positive. That means on the other side of that point of inflection, our second derivative has to be negative. Because by definition of the point of inflection, the concavity changes on either side, meaning that our second derivative is going to have to change on either side. And last thing with point of inflection, it also helps us determine whether we have maxima or we have minima. And sorry, I misspoke there. Not our point of inflection, our second derivative test. So if our function is concave up, that means that we have a minimum. And if our function is concave down, that means that we have a maximum at that point. So I guess there is also a relationship with your point of inflection, because your point of inflection is going to change, and it's going to tell you on one side you're probably going to have a max, on the other side you might have a min. It's not guaranteed that you have a local max and min on either side of a point of inflection, but in some cases that will be true. Okay, moving on to our last letter in DISCA. So our last letter in DISCA here is A, which stands for asymptotes. So note that not all functions will have asymptotes. For example, if you have a polynomial, there's going to be no asymptotes. But if you have a rational function, then there's a very good chance that you will have at least one asymptote. So it's always good to make sure that you can check for those. So VA stands for your vertical asymptote. And how can you find these? Well, you're going to have to use limits. If you need some help with limits, make sure that you check out my other videos on calculus and limits. The other thing you can do for your vertical asymptote is you can set your denominator equal to 0 and solve for x. That's probably the easiest way to find your vertical asymptote there. However, for horizontal asymptotes, you also have to use limits. There's also some other strategies you can use when you break it down into 3 cases. I will be making another video about that shortly, but for now, use your limits to help you determine your horizontal asymptote. Also make sure that you're using limits to help you determine the end behavior of your function, because there are some rabbit hole cases where your function might actually cross an asymptote. You heard me correctly. There are cases where that can happen. It is a bit more rare, but please be sure to watch out for that. And if it crosses an asymptote, it'll usually go back to hugging it really quickly. But you can kind of use your end behavior to determine whether your function is gonna be a lie, I guess, above or below your asymptote in that case. So always be sure to use limits to check your end behavior, and also use limits to check your asymptotes. Okay, so that was a lot of theory, and I hope you're staying with me, because now we get to the fun part where we're going to look at an example. So let's go through a quick example here so we can see how to use all this in action.